Before there was Young Frankenstein, Spaceballs, History of the World Part 1, and Robin Hood Men in Tights, there was Blazing Saddles, the classic slapstick comedy brought to you by great comedic minds like Mel Brooks and Richard Pryor. Mel saw our next guest in his first movie and knew right away that he wanted him to play the character of Lyle in the film. Like a lot of characters in the story, Lyle had his share of memorable lines that people are still quoting today. Once Burton Gilliam brought Lyle to life, it helped him launch a movie career that allowed him to showcase other memorable characters in movies like Fletch, Honeymoon in Vegas, and Back to the Future 3. I sat down with Burton to discuss what in the wild world of sports it was like going on that set and shooting the very funny classic slapstick movie, Blazing Saddles. And Burton Gilliam, thank you so much for joining us today on Beyond the Screens.
Hey, I'm proud to be here. This will be fun.
A lot of people know you from Blazing Saddles, but I also think it's important to remind everybody that that was not your first role, however.
No, it was my second.
Yeah.
I had done a picture called Paper Moon just before that, which was an Academy Award winner. The little girl, Tatum O'Neal, won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress when she should have won for Best Actress. So she was the star of the show.
Yeah.
But yeah, that Paper Moon was my first out of the box.
And before all that, you had been a boxer, you'd done some firefighting and a number of other things. What was it that suddenly caught your interest about acting?
I'm sure of this. I loved fighting before 12,000 people at a time, and I did that many times. I liked them holding my hand up and the crowd yelling for me, because I know they were all my friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
They were all pulling for me. I know they were.
Instead of yelling Rocky, Rocky, they were yelling Burton, Burton.
That's exactly right. So that being a boxer for actually off and on for 15 years was just a prelude to the next step, which was getting in front of the camera and speaking lines.
Well, my understanding is, we've had a chance to talk about this before, and I wanted to have everybody learn a little bit about this too. Mel Brooks really wanted you for this role and had to work a little bit to get you out there to play it.
He wanted me to do it. I had done, like I say, I'd done Paper Moon and never thought I'd do anything else. I took my vacation from the fire department to do the thing. Then, about 3 months after I finished the picture, some guy came calling at the fire station, and his name was Mel Brooks, and I had never heard of him. So he had to convince me who he was, and he wanted me to do this picture called Blazing Saddles, and I kept telling him I didn't have any more vacation time coming, but he convinced me to come out to Hollywood and see him, all expenses paid, first class. And here I was, a fireman. I didn't know what I was doing. But I went out to see him and told him no. Told him and all of his producers and writers and Richard Pryor, I told him no. Then went back to Dallas. Then about a week later, I got a phone call from some guy who said, "Hey, this is Richard." I said, "Richard who?" He said, "Richard Pryor, man." So I knew right then.
Wow.
Business was picking up.
You couldn't tell Richard Pryor no.
I couldn't tell him no. He said, "We've rewritten your part. We want you to do this thing. So come back and see us." So I went back to see him again. Told him no again. Then the third time out, I found out they had a lot of money. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was to me as a fireman. It was a ton of money. I made enough. I'll tell you right now, I made enough in 4.5 weeks that it would have taken me 2 years at the fire department to make. Wow. And it just set me, and I didn't know it. I knew nothing, but it set me out in front of thousands of character actors. It just immediately put me to the front, because here I was, I'd done a picture called Paper Moon and Blazing Saddles. Neither one of them had been released, but there was talk all over Hollywood about both of those pictures. And when they were released, well, it was an immediate shot in the arm for me.
and the rest is history.
The rest is history. That's why I'm back here in Dallas, and you're sitting here talking to me.
When you did finally get a chance to see that very Mel Brooks script for the first time, what was your reaction to it?
I walked into his office, and there were about 12 people behind this conference table. And of course, the one that jumped over the table and ran into my arms, hollering, "This is the guy we want, this is the guy we want." Well, after we laughed for a while, he just pitches me a script, slides it across the table, and says, "Here's a script. We want you to do the part of Lyle, so go back to your hotel and read it, come back and see us tomorrow." So, I didn't know anything about reading a script. I knew what was funny to me, but that didn't mean it was funny to anyone else, and I wasn't sure that what I was reading was all that funny. The long and short of it was I came back the next day and told them no, and then I go back home, Richard calls, and I go back and read the script, read another script, read what they had rewritten, and I knew that was funny. It was the whole first scene. The original script did not have me in the first scene. This one had me as the protagonist of the picture in the first scene, and I knew what I was reading there was really funny, and I knew that I could make something out of it. I was not an actor, didn't look at myself as an actor, but I know that I read into it fun, and I read into it a mean guy, mean person who wasn't looked at as mean. He was looked at as funny. And boy, I could get behind that all day.
Yeah.
I knew I could do this role.
I read something on the Internet Movie Database about your role in it and some of the interaction that you had with Cleavon Little and how it was obviously, and as it would be for a lot of people, to utilize a certain word around Mr. Little, and he pulled you aside and said, "Look, man, you didn't write these words. If these were your words, it'd be a different story. But these aren't your words, so go ahead and it's fine."
Go ahead and say them. He said, "You can call me anything you want to." And we were out on the desert. He and I took a little walk because he knew I was having a little trouble with all the words I was having to say to him. And as we started walking back to the set, he said, after they yell cut, don't you dare call me that. I said, "Yes, sir."
He was one of those guys, too, that we lost way, way too soon, and he seemed to be just a heck of a... He was perfect for that role. I read originally it was going to go to Richard, but there were some budgetary concerns there, so they got Cleavon Little, and he really was a good fit for that role.
He was a great pick for it by the way it was all set up around him. Had it been all set up around Richard, who knows how it would come out. It might have been way even better, but it might have flopped on its face too. Who knows? That's something we'll never know. It's a good subject to talk about, though.
Everybody had so much fun in the film that I'm sure everybody got along great, but it looked like everybody was having fun.
He was great to me. He was on the set for the first 5 or 6 days because, he really was, I know he was hoping that something might happen, maybe that Cleavon would break his leg or something. I don't know. And he'd be able to step in there and they'd do it. He'd be the guy. But none of that happened. So after it did not happen, and he had already written the things he was going to write in the picture, I never saw him again. I saw him at the world premiere of the thing, but that's the last time I saw Richard Pryor. But every time I was around him, he was so proud that I was saying his words, because that whole first scene in the picture, he wrote every word I said. And I know that he loved the way that I interpreted them and got them out there. I know he did.
Are you talking about the scene where you're getting the guys to sing?
Yeah. And come on, boys, I don't hear no singing. When you was slaves, you sang like birds, and on and on and on.
Yeah. And people remember that scene too. I mean, I'm sure you've had to talk about the Camptown Ladies more than once ever since that film.
Oh, that's nearly every day. If I'm out in the public anywhere, that's going to come up, and I don't bring it up. I don't have to bring it up. It's just natural. And if you follow me at all on Facebook, oh boy, you'll know that I write every day about something about Blazing Saddles because it's asked of me, and I'm pretty good about writing to people that I never heard of, and I have a lot of fun doing that.
Well, it's funny. I mean, you think about being associated with a song in the film. You're almost in that position where, like a lot of bands that do a hit, and everywhere they go, they got to play this song.
That's right.
You're almost in the same position.
That
Everywhere you got to go, you got to sing that song.
Even though they may be great and they may have put out hundreds of songs after that, but the one that put them on the map is the one that they want to hear.
Can you talk a little bit about, once he got you out there and in the film, what it was like working with Mel?
Well, I had done Paper Moon before. That was the only thing I'd ever done in my life. I'd never been in a grade school play. I knew nothing about how people direct or how people act. I just did it. And in Paper Moon, Peter Bogdanovich, the director, he told everybody what to do, not the lines to say. He knew that you were supposed to know your lines, but he told everybody where their mark was, where they were going to move to, the hand gestures they made, the way that they put together their sentence, the way that they did everything, where to go, what to do. And I thought that's the way all directors worked. I went out a day early to watch what they were doing, and I found out Mel didn't work that way. He assumed you knew everything that you were supposed to do. So he just said action, and you had to create your own action, not create the words, but create whatever was going on in the scene. He leaves that up to the actor. And I thought, holy mackerel, Leroy.
Polar opposite from the last film.
Right, yes, totally opposite. So I had to start thinking the next morning. Well, I thought about it as soon as I saw him working, and then as learning my lines for the next day, I had to figure out what I was going to do and where I was going to go do it. I was having a tough time because Paper Moon, they don't know that, but they don't. The writer didn't know it, but he wrote it for me. He didn't know it. He wrote it for me. The words, the lines were so easy for me to do. Come Blazing Saddles. Oh, I had a tough time with the lines, and I still do. I'm not one of these guys who can pick up a script and know 5 pages just like that. I can't do it. But Mel knew I was having trouble with the lines, and he came over to me and said, hey, don't worry about this. Don't worry about the lines. If we have to, we'll do it one line at a time, because I know you give me great lines. So don't worry about it. If it needs to be done one line at a time. Hey, as a matter of fact, he says, Jimmy Stewart, the great Jimmy Stewart, James Stewart, he never could do over 2 or 3 lines at a time. He just couldn't do it. It just wasn't in him. He could not remember the lines. He said, so don't worry about it. I said, hey, if Jimmy Stewart can do it, you can do it. I said, oh, thank you. So we finished the day, and I had a great day. It was wonderful. And that night, as we left, I went by to see him, and I said, boy, thank you for telling me about the Jimmy Stewart thing. Golly, he said, what are you talking about? I said, you were telling me that Jimmy Stewart couldn't remember. He said, are you crazy? That wasn't true. I just told you that.
And it worked, though.
It worked.
It's funny, I was looking at some other facts about the film on the Internet Movie Database, and it talked about how Mel had almost kind of promised everybody that he was going to cut some of the more offensive and or abrasive scenes, but he ended up not cutting any of them. And one of the ones that mentioned that he said he was going to cut but didn't cut was the infamous scene where everybody's eating beans around the campfire and farting up a storm.
But he didn't cut any of that.
No, he didn't cut any of that. That was one of the ones he was supposed to that didn't make it. But I would assume too that's another scene you hear a lot about.
Oh, yeah. Well, and you mentioned cutting lines. There were some lines cut. It was a trade-off with the studio. There were some real crazy lines. There were about 3 lines that were really over the top. Mel Brooks didn't see it was over the top, but the studio did. But so they got down to the point where they said, okay, Mel would say, I'll give you this line, but you got to keep this one over here, and I'm not budging on this. You got to keep that line. So they did some give and take on the thing.
I can only imagine what those lines were.
Oh. One of them was actually cut from the picture, and it was in the first scene where I say something to Cleavon, and he says, truth be known, my mama was Dutch. And then there was a line right after that they cut completely out.
Well, we've talked about a couple of lines that you're known for and that you hear about all the time. What are some of the scenes that you personally are a big fan of outside of some of the ones that you've got to be a part of?
Oh, I'm a big fan of the scene where the preacher and all the townspeople are together, and they're gonna get the sheriff to come and clean up the town, and the preacher says he's praying, says, "Oh Lord, are we doing this and doing it right? Yak yak yak. Are we just jerking off?" But there are, I really have to say, I'm a fan of every scene in the picture. There were some parts of the picture, interiors, that Mel would have loved to do over again because they weren't filmed exactly right. They had a look about them that was not real good, and we have talked about this. He would have loved to had another $100,000 for that day to do it again.
Yeah.
But it all had to do with look. It didn't have to do with lines or how funny it was. He just would have preferred to have a better look.
Really, it's interesting, and I think studio involvement plays a big role in this. But, really after Mel Brooks made his big run of these type of films, slapstick films, and David Zucker made his films in Airplane and those, this style of humor, I think, in a lot of ways, is kind of a lost art form anymore. It's not to say there aren't any funny films, but just this unique approach, this quality of humor, this imaginative style of humor just really hasn't been there for a while. Would you say that's true?
Oh, I'm sure it's true. I know it's true. And Mel, if this kind of humor could still be done, oh man, he'd be prolific. Yeah. He's 86 years old now, but I guarantee you he's got stuff in the back of his mind that he could pop out in a moment, and he could line you up with 4 pictures so quick it'd make your head swim. But the style is, the type of humor is gone now, and not because the masses of the people want it gone.
Right.
It's because of censors and a small amount of people that just don't want that type of stuff done anymore.
Yeah. Well, I know that you get approached a lot about Blazing Saddles, but we know that you've done Honeymoon in Vegas and Fletch and Back to the Future 3. Do you find a lot of people approaching you about those films a lot? I would think Fletch would be one. I remember listening to a radio interview with you one time, and I think it was on a local station here, and they were doing the whole "he gives you that look" line.
He got that look, Yeah, he's got that look. Yeah. I would. Honeymoon in Vegas in popularity, I think, is right behind Blazing Saddles. Then Fletch, but there is a legion of fans for Fletch that is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, that legion of fans will say, oh man, that's the funniest movie ever done. It's the greatest picture ever done. And now Blazing Saddles is funny, but boy, Fletch is this and that and the other, you know. And that was a fun little picture to do because Chevy Chase was, oh golly, he was so good to me, and he always is. Every time he sees me, I had no idea how we were going to do the scene because he did not want to do the scene as it was written. So we didn't do it as it was written.
Oh, okay.
There was another airplane mechanic in that scene. Chevy called me, had the casting office call me over. They were shooting somewhere in some park in Beverly Hills the day before we shot that scene. And he said, he asked if I'd come over there. So I went over to meet him and shake hands with him, and we laughed at him because he fell out of a chaise lounge. He did the Chevy Chase stuff.
Yeah, I did this.
But he said, I don't like the way this scene is written. He said, and I know, he said, I've seen your work. I know that we can improv this scene. We got a place to start. We got a place to finish. Let's you and I play with it. We did not put the other guy in on what we were going to do. Chevy said, leave him out of it. They'll cut to him and he'll say something, you know. And if you notice, every time he says anything, it's like, he's he's having to just kind of throw a line in there, doesn't know where he's going with it. But that's what Chevy wanted to do it, and it turned out it was a great scene.
It is a great scene. It's a great movie, and
just one scene, but it's
I mean that between that and the bypass line is something that everybody remembers.
He ain't doing no singing with the Tabernacle Choir either, you know.
I know that you've also, I mean, even after all these films, you're still doing a lot of stuff today. Did you want to share some things that you're doing now with everybody?
I just 2 months ago finished a little picture with Daniel Baldwin. I've now worked with all the Baldwins. They each have their own individuality, but they all come out of the same pod. You know?
Right.
And I love every one of them. They're just dancing to a different tune, you know. Daniel wrote, directed, starred in, helped produce this picture, and we did it down in San Antonio, and I don't even know what they're going to call the thing. It'll probably be out in another 6 or 8 months, but be watching for one with Daniel Baldwin, and a true story that is not a comedy. It's a very serious piece about drugs. Daniel knows about drugs. Oh me! But it could be a little sleeper of a picture. I think it's got a good message, and it's a hard-hitting picture.
I've really enjoyed being able to spend a few moments here and talk to you about Blazing Saddles. I learned some stuff today that I didn't know, and that's always good, but it's always fun to talk to you, and I really appreciate you taking time to join us today on the Beyond the Screens podcast.
Well, thank you. You and I have known each other for 10 or 12 years or something like that, done a few things together, and it's always a pleasure to work with you because I know you're going to come up with something that other people haven't come up with. That's a fact. When you talk, you bring into play other things that people don't even, interviewers don't normally pick up on. And folks, I'm telling you, there's a real art to someone who can interview. When you're the interviewee, you just kind of sit back and go at your pace and say what you want to say. An interviewer like you've got to know your A's and B's.
Well, I appreciate that, sir.
Right.
Well, and you're a good interviewee.
Thank you very much. When did I get paid?
That's another interview. I answer those questions.
All right, pal. Thank you for having me on your show.